Envase Technologies creates a suite of solutions that makes it easier to run your trucking business. For drivers and carriers, our solutions put control back in your hands with a TMS, capacity and storage marketplace, and rate management system. Optimize your operations with less administrative headaches and increase the value of your time spent on and off the clock. Envase Technologies, driving progress, delivering innovation. For more information, visit envasetechnologies.com. That's ENVASE Technologies.com.
Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge, and I am so excited for the show today. We've got Lars Jensen coming up in just a few minutes to talk about the state of shipping, the state of supply chain, the state of logistics, what is happening, what do we need to know, and how can we plan for the rest of 2024. But first, we need to hear from our show sponsors. So are you ready to find your people? If you are struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, well, look no further. We created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in our three distinct value-packed communities: the Supply Chainers, Women in Supply Chain, and the Creative Room. From the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the Supply Chainers to the empowering community-focused space of Women in Supply Chain and the marketing mastermind of the Creative Room, we mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. So head over to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com to explore which community is right for you. All right. So what do we have in store for you this week? So we've got a brand new episode of the podcast where we've taken episode 1 of Supply Chain Unfiltered, which is one of our new live shows hosted by Christine Barnhart. And she had Karen Bursa on the first episode of her show. And we've turned it into a podcast episode just in case you missed it, because it was a powerful show talking about supply chain in an unfiltered way. So go and check it out, episode 398, wherever you listen to the show. Now we've got a LinkedIn Live happening on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're talking about Beyond Drayage TMS, 3 technology trends revolutionizing intermodal trucking. Now you're not going to want to miss this one. Go and click the attend button, even if you can't attend live, and I will send you the recording because you're going to want to hear from Travis, Mark, and Dennis. We've got a brand new Woman in Supply Chain blog with Katie Date. If you have not met Katie Date works for Manifest. She is also one of the facilitators for our virtual monthly meetup for Women in Supply Chain. Former MIT, grew the Woman in Supply Chain initiatives over there. And I truly, truly love her story. So go and check that out. The link will be in the comments so that you can read all about her inspirational journey. And next, we've got a brand new episode of Blended, What We Need to Know About Bias. This was a magical episode. We talked about what it actually means, what you need to know about it, how do we overcome it, how it's just really part of the human experience. And I think each one of us that were part of this episode learned something about not only ourselves, but our teams and our businesses. And so I really suggest you go and check that out. It's episode 397 on Let's Talk Supply Chain, but it's episode 42 on Blended. All right. Well, without further ado, it is time to bring up our guest for today, Lars. Good morning and good afternoon, because it's afternoon where you are.
Well, good afternoon and good morning to you. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us all the way from Denmark. So for those who don't know who you are, tell us who you are and what you do.
I am if it sounds boring, I'm a consultant. From my perspective, I like to solve puzzles. I see container shipping as one giant puzzle with a million pieces. And I'm trying to put them together to figure out what is happening and what is going to happen. And this is essentially what I've been spending the last 23 years doing. The last 12 years, I've been doing this as an independent consultant. On the side for that, again, that comes to the puzzle pieces. I'm also part of a company called Liner Game, where we provide a full day experience, literally with giant ships built with Lego bricks, and you get to run your own container shipping line, complete with taking cargo, loading small Lego containers on board, and handling all sorts of disruptions along the way.
Now, I have wanted to join this liner game forever. Hint, hint, JOC maybe for TPM next time. Or I've been trying to get some people together so that we could bring you together to do this game. Why is the Lego, why is this experience, why is this liner game so important for supply chain professionals in the industry?
It provides really an extremely good perspective of just how complicated this industry actually is. When you're faced with it, you got a Lego ship. It can have 54 containers, and most people's reaction is, how hard can this be? And an hour into the game, the recognition is this can be very, very hard indeed. Imagine what happens when you're moving not 54 containers, but 24,000 containers, plus have 700 ships on top of that. So it really gives people an appreciation of all the complexities and why it is things never really run as smoothly as you would like it to.
Well, I also think it gives appreciation and empathy of, the different parts and the different people that make supply chains run.
Absolutely. And the appreciation typically also comes through. I mean, we've had shipping lines, BCOs, forwarders, terminals. Everybody has been trying to play this game. And it appears most people come with the perspective that they know how to run their business. Everybody else must be doing something wrong. And this brings them a newfound appreciation that there's just a lot of moving parts outside anyone's control. And that creates a lot of problems.
Yeah, and taking a look internally, except instead of the blame game externally, which we're kind of traditionally used to in this industry. Now, you also love to travel, and I want to make this part of your introduction because you have gone to so many amazing places just in this last year. So, give us a bit of an overview of what you've been doing.
Oh, I mean, I think last year I went to almost 40 countries over the span of a year, but some of the highlights were, I spent 6 weeks on a vessel going all the way to Antarctica and staying on the vessel all the way up to the equator. I spent about a month sailing down the Amazon, basically straight across South America. And then just for the fun of it, I ended up having my birthday lunch on the beaches of Mogadishu in Somalia.
Amazing. Just for the fun of it. So what was your favorite place? Where would you go back to?
Oh, absolutely. The areas around Antarctica, actually, not Antarctica itself. The most fascinating places was South Georgia, located just north of Antarctica. It's just a haven for Arctic wildlife.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. Amazing. Now, for all of you watching, I want to know where you're watching from. So let us know in the comments because we'd love to hear from you. Lars is only here till 10:30 as well. So if you have any questions for Lars, make sure to put those in the comments. Now, you all know that we ask a poll every single Wednesday morning on the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn and Instagram. So the question that we asked you last week was, how do you prefer to consume books? We had almost 400 votes. 63% of you said physical books always, 20% of you said audiobooks, and 15% of you said ebooks. What do you think about this, Lars? How do you consume books?
For me, it's easy. It's physical books always. I have tried the other ones. With my travel schedule, it would make a lot more sense not to lock physical books around. They just don't work for me. For me, it has to be a physical book. Otherwise, I lose my attention.
For the length of time that you spend traveling, you'd need a whole new suitcase for all those books.
Well, at least there's a limit as to how many books I can lug around.
Yeah, okay. True. So for me, I actually do all three. So audiobooks for me is nonfiction. So business books, self-help, memoirs, that kind of thing. Ebooks, I like true crime, and I actually read that before I go to bed. And then physical books on the beach always, because I don't want to get sand in my iPad or my Kindle or what have you. Narisa says all of the above. Heather says I love a physical copy. Bruce says I'm not sure. I prefer reading books instead of eating them. Okay. Audrey says switch to a Kindle in 2023 and I'm never going back. And Cheryl says I think all books should come with a free ebook download. Well, thank you so much to everybody who weighed in on the question of the week. We always love having that conversation with everybody. And so come back on tomorrow because we'll have another question for you. All right, now it's time for a bit of a market update. Now, Lars, with the first article, you and I are going to be talking a little bit more about the Red Sea, but give us a bit of a market update. What are you seeing? What are people talking about? What should people be thinking about right now?
What we're seeing, and this is really also a spin-off of all the discussions that happened over at TPM in Long Beach, where you were also over just a few weeks ago. It is a very, very weak market out there in terms of demand. Freight rates are still abating and going down in most of the trade lanes. And given all the Red Sea disruptions that we're going to come back to, that freight rates still continue to go down is a clear sign that demand in the market is simply not there. That I think is the overarching element that's important out there right now.
Yeah. And what are you seeing as far as, rates and things like that when it comes to ocean freight?
Well, when it comes to ocean freight, of all the increases that we saw, for example, Asia, Europe, after we were hit by the Red Sea, more than half of those have been given away by the carriers already. The downturn in rates into the US began a little later than into Europe, but that's also full on right now. And presently, it seems there's no stopping it. On the Atlantic, rates went up and they're holding firm. But here, context is important. Rates on the Atlantic reached ridiculously low levels last year. They flatlined on very loss-making rates. The carriers have been successful restoring them to at least a level resembling where we were before the pandemic. So they're holding firm there. So I wouldn't say it's a strong rate environment in the Atlantic. It's not, but at least it's been restored to what you could say is a minimum viable level compared to where we came from a few years ago.
And what does this mean? Because, when we've got lower rates, everybody's sort of, great because they're sort of, I guess, traumatized from what happened during the pandemic with those really, really high rates. And so everybody is like, yay, the rates are coming down. But if they go too low, what does it mean for the industry? Because I don't think that does anybody any good.
It doesn't do anybody any good. And the reality is if rates go down too low, eventually you're just going to see more blank sailings, carrier schedules becoming even more erratic. That's simply going to be the reality of it. We were seeing that already last year before we were impacted by the Red Sea, that same kind of phenomenon. We've seen it in the past as well. So extremely low rates. Yeah, it feels good that week or two when you get the low rates, but there's a price to be paid in terms of supply chain instability.
Well, and if we think about disruptions, right, we're already dealing with all sorts of different disruptions with this on top of it, right? We can't necessarily be celebrating because it's just another disruption on top of disruptions.
Yeah, exactly. And for stable supply chains, one of the things that's interesting to note is obviously when Red Sea happened and spot rates shot up, you do have some shippers out there who during last year when spot rates became very low, did not renegotiate their contracts, but stayed honest to the contracts despite the spot market being lower. And guess what? When the market suddenly exploded due to the Red Sea, those were the ones that could still get space and could still book cargo on their contractual rates. There is a quid pro quo.
So that is some advice when we're thinking about when the rates are kind of roller coastering like they have been, and you have contracts in place thinking about renegotiating or what have you. That's some good advice in the fact that where do you want to be? Where do you want your supply chain to be? Where do you want to be as a priority for the steamship lines?
Yeah, and the challenge for a lot of, if you look at this from a shipper or BCO perspective out there, most of them will have memories of being, let's call it what it is, being stabbed in the back by the carriers.
Mm-hmm.
But if you then follow that thread, you will find that they stabbed the carriers in the back, but they did it because they were stabbed. This is a never-ending story. And the problem here is, when do you then take the plunge and say, okay, fine, I'll take the first step, I'll stay honest to the contract to build up some reliability and trust? That takes years to do.
Yeah, it absolutely does. All right, let's get to our first article. So this was put out by Lodestar talking about Cosco and OOCL actually not calling at ports in Israel. So let's talk about the state of the shipping industry right now. What are some updates from the disruption in the Red Sea? I know on your LinkedIn page, Lars, you've kind of been giving a daily update. I think you're up to, what are we at, 100 and something days?
We're at least at a day 102 since the carriers began diverting around Africa.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What is happening in the Red Sea? What do we need to know? Why is this happening right now? And do we see any sort of, light in the future?
In the immediate future, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. What we
Mhm.
have seen also in recent weeks is a continuing escalation of the situation. This is getting worse. It is not getting better. The frequency of attacks against merchant vessels is increasing. It's not decreasing. And that is despite now the presence of both a US naval force and an EU operation being present down there. Sure, there's been some success in shooting down missiles and drones. There have been US bombings of facilities on land in Yemen, but absolutely none of that have done anything to make the situation more calm.
Well,
So,
go ahead.
for the foreseeable future, the main carriers, they will simply continue to go around Africa. Now, mind you, that's for the big shipping lines going Asia Europe. You have a host of regional shipping lines that have increased operations. They go between Asia and into the Red Sea through the risk area. Most of those have never been attacked.
Why is that?
Either it could be the luck of the draw, but also keep in mind a lot of these local carriers, I mean, either they are owned and operated out of the Middle East or further out in Asia.
Mhm.
And here's the catch. I mean, the Houthis, whom I would say we shouldn't necessarily trust at their word, but at least their stated intention is to target US, UK, and Israeli affiliated ships. Whether something is UK affiliated is very much up to interpretation. And we did see just a few days ago a Chinese ship actually got attacked because I think the Houthis just don't know what they're doing when they come to when it comes to market intelligence. But I think a lot of the regional carriers, they can go in and out unmolested because the Houthis don't necessarily see them as part of the conflict, at least for now.
Well, and I think also, doesn't it come to the flag of the vessel? And that's really hard to navigate, is it not?
Yeah, the problem is this assignment of nationality to a ship, because a ship can be flagged in Malta, but
Right.
then might be owned by a company in Luxembourg who is half
Mhm.
owned by a capital fund in the US,
Mhm.
managed by a company in Greece, chartered to a Danish company, operating on behalf of, say, a German entity.
Mhm.
Whatever ship you look at, you can easily assign 10, 15 different nationalities. That's what makes this so complicated.
Well, and to your point, how do you, if we can't figure out who actually is behind that vessel and owning the vessel because it's 15 layers deep, how are they determining that as well? And so it's very
Yeah,
risky to go in there. I also heard that they are expanding, I think, where they are going to be doing this from.
Yeah, I mean, initially all the attacks were in the southern end of the Red Sea. Then, as we came into 2024, this expanded to the Gulf of Aden, which actually jeopardizes all cargo going to Ethiopia. And just a few days ago, you heard from the Houthis now they were threatening to attack much further out into the Indian Ocean. Apparently, they
Mhm.
want to attack the vessels that are going around Africa. It can be questioned whether physically they have the ability to do so, but that
Okay.
was at least their stated intention.
Yeah. So what does this mean for supply chain? What should supply chain professionals be thinking about when they are shipping from certain locations into North America? Should they be thinking about adding, extra days? Should they be thinking about extra cost? What is something that they can maybe think about to forecast as
Yeah,
we are going through this?
the simple part right now is things have stabilized. A
Mhm.
couple of months ago, it was extremely difficult because ships were in the wrong place and everything was just up in the air. Most liner services now have completely stabilized. So you will see immediately what is the transit time. Yes, it's longer than you have been used to, but at least it's stable and it works. So for cargo in and out of the US, as long as it doesn't involve cargo that then goes through the risk areas in the Gulf of Aden or the southern part of the Red Sea.
Interesting. Now that's not the only disruption that we've seen. I think was it this morning or yesterday there was an incident in Baltimore?
Yes, unfortunately, a 10,000 TEU vessel struck the major port in Baltimore, and about 2.5 kilometers of the bridge have collapsed. This
Mm,
is one of the things where, depending on your perspective, this is a non-issue or a major issue. Now, we don't know at this point in time how many people on the bridge lost their lives, so we can't comment on that. But from a supply chain perspective, this is an unmitigated disaster in Baltimore and the immediate surroundings. It is also going to be an issue in the northeastern seaboard of the US. Baltimore is not the largest container port. If we look at Q4 last year, which is the newest data we have on demand, they handle about 265,000 TEU in Baltimore. The two nearest large ports, that's either New York, New Jersey, which handle 2 million TEU, or Norfolk, that handle 860,000. So with the bridge now blocking the access into the port, all this cargo to Baltimore is likely going to be redirected to go through New York, New Jersey, or through Norfolk. That means a 10% increase in volume through those two ports. That is going to create some delays. It's going to create some increases in cost. There is a potential for some degree also of bottlenecks, but not to disastrous levels. What has me somewhat concerned might be the inland transportation in from these ports. Sure, we can redirect some of the trucks, but the rail link that goes from Baltimore and further inland, we can't shift the rail link. So the challenge here is this could provide a significant pressure on anybody that uses those rail links going in. And the open question here is, how long does it take to remove a collapsed bridge from that entry into the port? That is completely unknown.
Wow. And so
and that's from the US Eastern Seaboard perspective. If we look at it from a global perspective, this is a non-entity.
Right.
Because from a global perspective, the sheer volume going to Baltimore is tiny. And again, it goes to nearby ports. Baltimore is not a central node in any hub and spoke networks or anything like this. So this is a large regional issue, but globally, it doesn't matter.
Right. But anybody going into the port of New York, New Jersey, there's going to be significant volume increases, which means
exactly with all the risk, longer wait times, likely higher congestion costs, and whatever have you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that update. Now let's talk a little bit about your book. So you came out with a book called Liner Shipping 2025, How to Survive and Thrive. Why did you come out with this book? Let's talk about that first.
I mean, to me, the interesting thing in this industry is separating what I would call tactical events from long-term events. And tactical events, those can be large. That can be the pandemic. Tactical events, that can be your usual shipping cycles. Do you have a down cycle or an up cycle? But seen over much longer periods of times, there are some changes that are relatively predictable, where we see the industry move, again, with noise up and down, but move in a very, very predictable direction. And some of the directions that have been eminently predictable that we're still following is the effects of the increased digitalization. That continues to happen. And one of the major issues that are going to come in the coming years, and everybody needs to be prepared for it, is the shift to the fully electronic bill of lading, for example. Those are some of the elements that are coming. Another element is, at the core, this is about providing the most cost-effective networks. And if you do network analysis, there is one single thing that is extremely important to understand. In a hub and spoke network, from a liner's perspective, fewer, larger hubs are always more cost efficient. And this is partly what we also see. You saw Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd join up in the Gemini Corporation from next year. Look at their network. Their network is a reduction of direct services, more hub and spoke. From a cost perspective, that's exactly the right thing to do. There are shippers out there that are skeptical. Can they actually pull this off? Can they run on time? I'm not that skeptical. If I look at the performance these carriers had before the pandemic, in my mind, the pandemic again is noise, large scale noise, but it's noise. I don't doubt they can actually pull it off. And we're going to see more carriers move in that direction simply because it is more cost efficient. That's going to create pressure on ports and terminals, especially the transshipment hubs, because that means some of them are going to grow larger. Some of them might suddenly find themselves without any business at all. So these are some of the underlying trends. Same thing with consolidation. We have reached more or less the end point of consolidation with the large carriers. What was predictable was that at times the alliances will break up and you'll get new constellations. That's what we're going through. The one part where we have not really reached the end point of consolidation, that's in intra-Asia. You've got a large amount of small players, but the game was already afoot prior to the pandemic, and now it's ramping up, both with some of the global carriers wanting to expand their presence. You have some large regional carriers like, say, an express feeders, a one high, a PIL that wants to expand. And then you got an infusion of new players, in this case, port operators, DP World, Abu Dhabi Ports Group, and now we're beginning to see the Saudis also launch carriers. So the major battlefield, which is ongoing, is going to be in intra-Asia. And as I mean, these are underlying macro changes that will continue to happen, irrespective of whether we happen to have high or low freight rates, irrespective of whether we might have few or many blank sailings. So I see an industry where often we are so focused on these short-term changes. What happens to freight rates the next 3 months or 6 months, or do we need to lay up ships, that we tend to forget this groundswell that is coming and creating major changes that we really need to be prepared for.
So on top of all the disruptions that we're dealing with it right now, there's further disruptions that are going to come down the line as well from just, I think it sounds like more competition, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we also have to see how that plays out, right? When it comes to the ports, when it comes to the steamship lines, and
Yes.
like you said, when it comes to on-time port calls.
Exactly. And I think everybody has become a bit jaded over the last 3 years. I mean, nothing ran on time the last 3 years. Reliability was atrocious everywhere. But we seem to have forgotten where were we before the pandemic.
Right.
Just to give a very practical example, I mean, Maersk and Hapag are saying they want to run 90% on time with a new network. And we come from an environment right now where 90% sounds like a fever dream. But look at 2019. Obviously, Gemini didn't exist. So if we look at 2M, so Maersk and MSC, in 2019 alone, their Asia North Europe network was operating between 85 and 95% on time. From Asia to Mediterranean, they had 5 months in a row with 98% reliability on the port locations. So I think everybody has become jaded when it comes to reliability over the last 3.5 years. But we need to remember the last 3.5 years were not normal, not in the slightest sense of the word.
Absolutely. All right, we've only got 2 minutes to talk about our last article, but this is about AI. Now, I want to get your thoughts, Lars, on AI when it comes to logistics, because this article is saying by 2028, Gartner is reporting that 25% of all logistics professionals and their KPIs are going to be powered by AI. What do you think?
I think this sounds very, very odd. I can't make heads or tails of the headline, to put it bluntly. Couple of comments just from my side. Yeah, AI definitely have a role to play. First of all, I have the view on IT. As long as we talk about the technology, it's not ready for prime time. When we stop talking about technology and talk about the problems they solve, then we're getting close to something. AI is going to be a helpful tool to all employees. It's not going to take their jobs. It's going to make them better at their jobs. But AI is not going to run shop. And what it means that AI will take over KPIs, I frankly find that a sentence that is meaningless.
Well, and I also feel like we're running instead of walking with AI in a lot of instances, especially when it comes to some of these articles and how we're having some of these discussions, because I feel like we have to start small. We have to start with one process and then go from there. And it's really a multi-year journey rather than that end destination that everybody thinks this is going to solve in the next year.
Yes, and to me, it kind of brings the same vibe. You probably remember it as well, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where blockchain was all the craze. Blockchain is a nice technology, but it's kind of, we have the technology, let's try to cram it into everything. And I get the same sense that's where we are with AI right now.
I hear you on that one. And I think that's a great way. But another survey that they talk about in this article says 14% are implementing AI and most plan to when it comes to supply chain leaders. So I guess we're going to see where it's going to pop up and how it's actually going to help and where we're going to have successes and where we're going to have failures. All right. So we're coming to the end of the show. I just want to let everybody know where we're going to be. So on Thursday, I am hosting a LinkedIn Live about Beyond Drayage TMS. So join us at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you can't join us, click the attend button anyways, and I will send you the recording. And then at the end of April, I am going to be at the Supply Chain Symposium with Firmament, and hopefully I'm going to see you there. All right, Lars, that was great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see everybody next week.